How's it going, everyone? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use Python with enforced static type checking, using MyPy and some simple logic written in Python. Some will argue that static type checking ruins a perfectly simple language. Others will argue that static type checking is a smarter approach to writing code with less bugs. I belong to the second group because I appreciate it when my code tells me that I'm using the wrong type, and it happens far more often than I'd like to admit, even in the simplest of cases. Here I have a version number which was supposed to be of type string, but even with that knowledge, I inserted an integer because I was tired. My code editor immediately informs me of my silly mistake. As you can see right here, it tells me that I should have inserted a string. Another example could be when I'm creating a function. Here I tried to get the length of a string, but by accident I forgot to return the length. Instead, I returned the text directly, which was of type string, and that doesn't fit the type I promised to return, so the code editor complains once again. Since Python doesn't enforce types, all the code I showed you will still run. But the chances of encountering an error or a bug will be much higher when we ignore the type hints. So, what if there was a way to enforce static type checking? Well, there kind of is, and I chose to do it through the creation of a simple function that performs 3 tasks. First, it locates the current file I'm running. Second, it runs MyPy on this file. Third, it runs our main function only if there are no errors. But before I show you how it works, I'd just like to thank Zed for sponsoring today's video. Zed is a lightning-fast code editor written in Rust, and I've been using it to do all my coding for months now. If you feel like trying out Zed, I've left a link in the description box down below where you can download it for free. Anyway, let's get back to the video. The function I just described looks like this. Here, we import subprocess to execute MyPy commands. Next, from inspect, we import frameinfo and stack to help us locate the current file. And finally, from typing, we import callable, which is just used for typing. And in modern versions of Python, you might want to use collections.abc. Next, I defined a function that takes one callable argument, and I defined it to be keyword only for clarity. Here, I used the stack function to get the current file path of where this function was being called. And this returns the current frame. With that frame, I can get the current path, and then using subprocess, I can run MyPy on that path and set check to true because we want this to raise an exception if anything fails. Notice that in this command, I'm using dmypy, not just MyPy. This runs MyPy as a daemon or a server, which can be more than 10 times faster according to the MyPy docs since it caches previous runs. If we encounter an error, we could handle it here, but since MyPy is telling us already exactly what went wrong, I left this blank. Otherwise, if MyPy didn't find any errors, it runs our program as normal. It's also worth mentioning that you need to install MyPy if you want to use it, and you can do that either with pip install MyPy or via uv add MyPy, and that will allow you to use the MyPy command. Also, as a little disclaimer, I wrote this function as a quick proof of concept, so I'm sure there are many ways that it could be improved. It has not been fully tested, so don't just slap it into your projects and call it a day. If you have an idea of how to improve this function, I'd love to hear it in the comment section down below. But otherwise, let me show you how it works. So, right now we are in a module called mypy_tools.py. And I'm going to create one more module where I can write some trash code with the wrong types, just to show you that it works for all the code being called in your project. So here I'll create a new file called formatter.py, and it will contain one function that formats some text. And in this example, it's going to return the wrong type. As you can see, this function clearly returns the wrong type here. We shouldn't even be allowed to run it according to the types we defined here, but Python is a soldier and will try to execute your code regardless of what you type. Next, let's go to our main.py file. And here, what we're going to do is import format from the formatter. And from MyPy tools, we're going to import MyPy, which is the custom function I created over here. Then I will create one last trash function that will make any static type checker upset. And this will be called stringify. And what it should have done is stringify an integer. Instead, I decided to return the length of that integer, which doesn't even make any sense. So once again, I'm returning the wrong type, and the code editor is complaining, but we're going to pretend we didn't see that. Finally, we will create our main entry point and try to call some code. The format function is broken, but we wouldn't know that until we ran our program. And here, instead of running main directly, we pass it to our static type checker first. And this will ensure that the code only runs if there are no errors. Now watch what happens when I run this. MyPy scans all of the files and finds the errors in our program. In formatter, we have an incompatible return type, and then in main.py, we also have two other errors. And Python did not run our code because we had these errors. So let's fix these errors. And the first one I'm going to fix is the one we had in format.py. So here we're just going to return text.capitalize. Then in main, instead of returning the length of n, we're just going to return the string of n, like we should have. Now, the next time we run this, MyPy is going to tell us that there were no issues found in one source file. And then it's going to execute the code we had in main. And just like that, we were able to simulate enforced static type checking. But again, there still might be some bugs I haven't discovered yet with this function, so please use it with caution. And that just about covers everything I wanted to talk about in today's video. Do let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section down below. But otherwise, with all that being said, as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.